Hi, welcome to Echoes from the Satellite. I'm Karen, and today we're going to talk about the H.G. Wells classic, The Island of Dr. Moreau. And so I'm going to talk about this book, this novel, but this is also a tie-in with the podcast that I'm a part of, the Planet 8 podcast, which you can find here on YouTube, and I'll leave some links in the show notes. So on the Planet 8 podcast, I'm joined by my friends Larry and Bob, and we've been doing Planet 8, I think, for 7 or 8 years now. And what we do is we talk about uh, films and TV shows that are science fiction, fantasy, or horror. And so we just did an episode on Planet 8 about the film adaptations of The Island of Dr. Moreau, all three of them. Uh, and so it seemed like it would be fun to do a crossover and have me do a review of the novel. So that's what I'm up to today with this. This is a very recent edition. I think this came out this year. And this is from Penguin. I believe I thought it was Penguin. It says vintage. Let me take a quick peek in here. It is Penguin. And the fun thing about this cover is when Bob saw it, he said, "Oh, it's like a Beast Man wearing a H.G. Wells t-shirt." And now that he said that, I can't think of this any other way. Uh, so anyway, this is actually shockingly my first read of H.G. Wells. Now I've had another H.G. Wells book sitting around for a while, and this is a double version. It's got the Time Machine and the Invisible Man in it, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to read that. I'm going to read that, but then I keep reading other things. But now that I've read one Wells book, I think I'm much more inclined to read some of his other stories. It actually was a very easy read, fun read. I know sometimes when we go back and we read things written especially um, prior to the 20th century, it can be a little difficult because of changes in language and idiom and so forth. But I found Wells pretty easy to read, actually. And I should say, yeah, this was published in 1896, so almost 130 years ago. But still a very engaging read. And I think the themes in the novel still resonate quite a bit today. I'm not going to give the whole plot of the novel, but I will give a little bit. I'll kind of give some of it, and I don't want to reveal everything, but I think it's 130 years old. You probably, if you're a science fiction fan, you're probably aware of it, or you may have seen any of the three films. Hopefully, uh, hopefully you've seen maybe Island of Lost Souls and not the Brando version, but whichever one you've seen, you've probably got the gist of it. So essentially, what happens in the book is there's our protagonist is Edward Prendick. He's a man who's been shipwrecked, and so he's at sea. He's taken in on board a boat, rescued essentially. And on this boat, he meets this man named Montgomery, and Montgomery has some sort of medical background. It's unclear at first exactly what's happened to him. We kind of later find out that he's an alcoholic and he has some other misdeeds and so forth. And so Montgomery is on this boat. It's not his boat, it's not his ship, but he is transporting cargo to a remote island. And the cargo is wild animals. And he also has a manservant with him. Yes, back then there were manservants. And this servant is very strangely sort of misshapen and strange looking. And so as Prendick recovers for a few days, he starts to, ask questions and things and discovers that like the captain of the ship is not happy to have this cargo. He doesn't like Montgomery and he's generally very unhappy and wants to get rid of Montgomery and the cargo. Another boat comes along side of them as they approach this island, and all the cargo is put on the boat, and then the captain essentially sort of abandons Prendick in this little dinghy in the ocean and takes off. And so Montgomery takes pity on him and he rescues him from the dinghy and he takes him to the island. And then this is where all the weirdness happens. And Prendick gets to the island and he sort of sees that all the men who are unloading the boat look strange, right? There's just something weird about them. They're kind of brutal looking and again misshapen and hairy and everything. So he gets taken onto the island. He is brought into this compound where Montgomery lives and where his boss lives. And Montgomery isn't very forthcoming about his boss. He kind of says, well, he's a doctor, he does experiments, and that's why he wanted to be isolated so he would not be bothered while he does his experiments and so on and so forth. And so, later on, he discovers that he's Dr. Moreau, and Prendick has heard of Moreau, and he realized he was this man who left England in disgrace because of his experiments in vivisection. So as Prendick is getting settled in the compound, he keeps hearing these screams or howls from this puma that was on board the ship, and the howling is driving him nuts. So he breaks out of the compound and he's sort of wandering around in the jungle, and he winds up encountering some of the people or creatures that live there. And so he's kind of befuddled about what's going on and who they are. He's already asked Montgomery some questions, but Montgomery isn't very forthcoming. And so when he runs into these creatures, one of them, who is sort of like it looks like an ape man, kind of takes him in, and he tells him, oh, you're going to live with us. You can come live with us. So this is where he finds these creatures and sees that they've sort of built this little camp and a little society outside of Moreau's compound. And that's where he learns the law. And so he's brought, the ape man brings him in and says, he brings him into this little area, and he takes him to someone, and he says, he comes to live with you. It is a man. He must learn the law. I began to distinguish now. Bring the book around here so you can look at the cover. Might be nice. I began to distinguish now a deeper darkness in the black, a vague outline of a hunched up figure. Then I noticed the opening of the place was darkened by two more heads. My hand tightened on my stick. The thing in the dark repeated in a louder tone, say the words. I had missed the last remark. Not to go on all fours, that is the law, it repeated in a kind of sing-song. I was puzzled. Say the words, said the ape man, repeating, and the figures in the doorway echoed this with a threat in the tone of their voices. I realized I had to repeat this idiotic formula, and then began the insanest ceremony. The voice in the dark began intoning a mad litany, line by line, and I and the rest to repeat it. As they did so, they swayed from side to side and beat their hands upon their knees, and I followed their example. I could have imagined I was already dead and in another world. The dark hut, these grotesque dim figures, just flecked here and there by a glimmer of light, and all of them swaying in unison and chanting, not to go on all fours, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to suck up drink, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to eat flesh or fish, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to claw bark of trees, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to chase other men, that is the law. Are we not men? And so from the prohibition of these acts of folly on to the prohibition of what I thought then were the maddest, most impossible, and most indecent things one could imagine. A kind of rhythmic fervor fell on all of us. We gabbled and swayed faster and faster, repeating this amazing law. Superficially, the contagion of these brute were upon me, but deep down within me, laughter and disgust struggled together. We ran through a long list of prohibitions, And then the chant swung round to a new formula. His is the house of pain. His is the hand that makes. His is the hand that wounds. His is the hand that heals. And so on for another long series, mostly quite incomprehensible gibberish to me about him, whoever he might be. I could have fancied it was a dream, but never before have I heard chanting in a dream. His is the lightning flash, we sang. His is the deep salt sea. A horrible fancy came into my head that Moreau, after animalizing these men, had infected their dwarfed brains with a kind of deification of himself. However, I was too keenly aware of white teeth and strong claws about me to drop my chanting on that account. His are the stars in the sky. So if you watched any of the films, you know that that chant of the law figures very prominently in the films. Or you may have heard Devo and heard "Are We Not Men?" Yeah, the chant of the law is very important. And at this point, Prendick begins to feel that he's sort of come into like a very strange reality, and his mind at times wonders if what he's experiencing is real or not. He winds up going back to the compound and confronting Moreau. And his apprehension prior to this had really been that Moreau was performing vivisections on men and turning them into animals. And what he comes to learn from Moreau is no, Moreau is performing vivisections on animals and turning them into men, which I don't really know which is more disturbing, but it's fairly disturbing stuff. I have to say, Wells's description of Moreau's activities, which for those times is primarily discussed as actions involving surgery, surgery upon the animals to, break and lengthen bones and take a forelimb of an animal and set it in such a way to make like an arm and things like that. It is kind of shocking even today and disturbing to think about. It's almost easier or maybe more bloodless to think of something like doing genetic experiments. But in the book, to hear or imagine hearing all of the poor animals crying out in pain as Moreau is doing these things to them, resetting limbs and cutting flesh and so forth. It is quite shocking and disturbing. And the thing is Moreau has no qualms about this. He has no sense of ethics that would keep him from doing this or feeling any guilt or reservations about it. And when Prendick confronts him and starts talking to him about it, Moreau, goes into this explanation. And again, it's, typical mad scientist, but it does, to me, echo a lot of sort of Dr. Frankenstein. So we'll read a short passage here as Moreau is talking to Prendick about what he's done. He says, "You see, I went on with this research just the way it led me. That is the only way I ever heard of research going. I asked a question, devised some method of getting an answer, and got a fresh question. Was this possible or that possible? You cannot imagine what this means to an investigator, what an intellectual passion grows upon him. You cannot imagine the strange, colorless delight of these intellectual desires. The thing before you is no longer an animal, a fellow creature, but a problem. Sympathetic pain, all I know of it, I remember as a thing I used to suffer from years ago. It was the only thing I wanted, to find out the extreme limit of plasticity in a living shape. But, said I, the thing is an abomination. To this day, I have never troubled about the ethics of the matter. The study of nature makes a man at last as remorseless as nature. I have gone on not heeding anything but the question I was pursuing, and the material has dripped into the huts yonder. It is nearly 11 years since we came here, I and Montgomery. I remember the green stillness of the island and the empty ocean about us as though it was yesterday. The place seemed waiting for me. And then he goes on and explains about, how he attempted these alterations, these creations that he made. The story proceeds on, and eventually, a lot of things happen, and I will allow you, hopefully, to read it for yourself to find out where it goes. I do feel like it's a very well written story. It was very engaging. I read this book very quickly. It's not very long. The edition I have here is a little over 150 pages, so it's probably a quick read for everybody. But I think it still has a lot of meaning for us today. Now, at the time that Wells wrote it, there was a very strong anti-vivisectionist movement, and that was the main motivator, from what I understand, for his writing it. But I think nowadays we still have that concern about playing God. We can do a lot of things today that were undreamt of in his time, right? We have gene manipulation, and we've seen certain hybrid organisms created. There's been a lot of concern about inserting different types of genes into different creatures, inserting human cells into animal cells, and so forth. So I think it still retains its relevance even today. And just the idea about just because we can do a thing, should we do a thing? That's always a question I think will, be with us as long as we are advancing forward in science. So a very powerful story. And some of the activities, some of the things that happen with the beast men, kind of the stratification of society, how Moreau essentially sets himself up as a god with them and enforces these rules on them. There's a lot of things to be said for about classism and so forth. So I think it's a very enjoyable read. I highly recommend it. And I hope you will take a look at our podcast on Planet 8 and see what we had to say about it there. I will say one of the things I noticed in the film adaptations, all of the film adaptations added a female love interest to the film. And I will say there is no female love interest, human, animal, or other. So that was interesting to see what the Hollywood thought was necessary to put into the movie. I think that each of them had certain elements that reflected the book better than the others. Definitely Burt Lancaster as Dr. Moreau seemed closest to Moreau in the novel. I thought that the Beastmen, maybe an Island of Lost Souls, really maybe the way they lived and everything might have been closest to the novel. Actually, I'm not sure what the 96 version had that was, so maybe the first two films were most reflective of the novel. So that's about all I have to say about Island of Dr. Moreau. I will say, I show you the cover of the book that I got, and it's okay, it's a new edition and everything. But I looked up some older covers, and I found a few that I thought were really interesting. So the first one being this SF Masterworks. And I love the Masterworks series. I really wish I could get a hold of more of them. But it has this really cool looking cover with sort of a half leopard, half human face on it. I thought that was really neat. And then I found this one. I don't really recognize the publisher. It's like Almont. Looks like it was from 1966, but it has this really sort of abstract science fiction look with almost like a, I don't know, Boris Karloff looking mad scientist on it, which I thought was pretty cool. And then finally, there's this Ace science fiction one, and it's also from the 60s, and kind of reminds me of the old books we would get from the book club when I was in grade school, and they were like, "Oh, so you can sign up and get a book next month." And yeah, that cover really reminds me of that style. So anyway, that's it for that review. Coming up soon, I hope to be reviewing Rendezvous with Rama with a friend of mine. So I don't have the book yet. I've got it ordered. So hopefully that'll be here pretty soon. Still working on the 2001 um, review. I think I overthought that a little too much. And then I did mention I got this book when I went to Bend, this huge honking Jack Vance book, and I want to get into this and read at least the Dying Earth story from this. So those are some of the things that are on my list right now. And that's it. I want to thank those of you who have been subscribing and commenting. I really appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Yes, I'm shilling for myself. I do hope to get a little bit more productive on this as things move along here. And just try to stay cool this summer, and hope to be back here and see you real soon. Thanks a lot.